you are watching, that we are convening. Today is Wednesday, March 10th. It is 5:05, and we welcome you all to this meeting. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, staff. Thank you, police officers, chief, and others. We certainly appreciate you being here and engaging in this important work. Would like to do my duty and read that we are confirming the determination of the core commissioners is to meet electronically because meeting at a physical location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. So stay safe, everyone, and if you are so inclined, hope your shots are going well. So just going through the agenda, hopefully everyone has had a chance to receive the agenda. There were some attachments to that, specifically around community policing and some definitions to that. I want to have a conversation around that and see if there's a particular definition that the commission would like to utilize or I guess kind of stand on as it does its work. And there will be some recommendations put forth by the School Safety Subcommittee for consideration by the commission. If we can get to a vote of approval for those, that would be ideal. If not, we can certainly at least table the final approval by the commission to a later date. We want to be able to get through those recommendations so that we can have them to consider one way or the other. So starting out, why don't we hear a update from the city, please? So Ms. Otto, welcome. Is she here? I don't see her on the screen. So anyone else from the city?
I am here. Thanks, Don. Sorry about
that.
Great.
Thank you.
I also have Mark Cottrell here with me. There he is. Thank you very much for giving us some time. We didn't want to take too much time, but did want to just kind of close out the legislative session with you. We have tried to keep you at least partially up to date on the dozens of law enforcement bills that we've been tracking this session. And Mark has really taken the lead on analyzing those bills and helping to make adjustments where needed for the city and for other municipalities, including ours, in conjunction with our partners. So we definitely made some progress this session. I don't know that there was anything incredibly earth-shattering, but Mark was going to take a few minutes and just walk you through a couple of the categories of bills that are most relevant to your work. So I will hand it over to him with a giant thank you to him for all of his work over the last 50 days or so.
Thank you. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, commissioners, for giving me the time here. Rachel mentioned there were dozens of bills. Yes, there were dozens of bills. And I'm going to try to constrain my discussion to a particular set of bills that I think this commission might find more relevant than others. However, I've also asked Coletta, and she probably has just distributed it, or maybe not yet, because I just barely emailed her right when this meeting was started, a document, which is a table of the bills that we were tracking and sort of what they were about, the bill number, what they were about, a description of them, and whether they passed or failed, and sort of a general topic area that I put them in. I might be, if I refer to a bill number, you could probably look at that table and click on the hyperlink, which would give you the text of the bill. So I'm going to try to keep it pretty tight, 10 minutes or so, and I'll be fairly broad, but certainly happy to answer any questions. I may not know all the specifics without getting bogged down into the actual language of the bills. And certainly I'd be more than happy to continue a discussion when there is more time about any particular bills that you guys have questions about. So if you see me looking over here, it's simply because my notes are on this other screen. So I apologize if that's a bit distracting. The general areas I'll cover today are the following. I'll talk about bills that dealt with use of force, bills that dealt with reporting discipline of officers, bills that talked about training, those bills that touched on the topic of bail reform, And then police procedures. There's one bill I think is relevant and of interest to this group. Another topic will be police oversight. Another one is schools. A larger one, which I know some of the commissioners have talked about in other meetings, I've categorized under policies, but it really is just all about the joint resolution declaring racism a moral public health crisis. And finally, I'll talk about one bill that fits under the qualification section of law enforcement officers. So I will go fairly quickly. And if you don't catch anything I say, please just feel free to shout out and interrupt. I don't mind at all. So going back to use of force, I've identified about 6 bills that I think are of interest to this group. The first one I'll talk about here is HB 84, and that is it's called Use of Force Reporting Requirements, and this bill passed. And what this bill requires is that the Bureau of Criminal Identification, it's a state entity, shall create a uniform statewide crime reporting system to include statistics on use of force by law enforcement officers, according to FBI standards. And agencies in the state shall report their use of force data to BCI. So I think that gets to some discussion about trying to gather a lot of this data, which is sort of out there, but not in one central place. The next bill is HB 154, which failed, and it was an attempt at legislating on use of force issues regarding critical incidents. It went through 3 versions, and previous versions include definitions that were very similar to Salt Lake City Police Department's definitions in its use of force policies, definitions like imminent, necessary, totality of circumstances. And also, the previous version of this bill would have required intervention of officers who might be violating another person's rights. And finally, it would have required critical incident investigations by county attorneys or district attorneys to be completed within 120 days and to have those findings made public. And if it wasn't to be completed in 120 days, a DA or county attorney would have to post on its website why it needed more time. So that bill failed. Another use of force bill, this one passed, it's HB 237, lethal force amendments. And that law says that an officer cannot use deadly force against an individual who is only a threat to himself or herself. I think the phrase that we've heard in the media before is suicide by cop. So essentially it's to prohibit an officer being justified under law in using deadly force against someone who is only a threat to themselves or others, or only a threat to themselves, not others. HB 264 is a bill that passed, and that bill requires officers to report if an officer points a firearm at an individual or aims a taser, also known as a CED, a conductive electronic device, at an individual and displays an electrical current. So they have to report that as a use of force incident. HB 367 failed. This is one that speaks to the concept of qualified immunity. This bill would have eliminated qualified immunity as a defense for causes of action under the Utah Constitution for deprivation of individual rights. I think we've seen something like that in Colorado that passed. An attempt to bring that forth here in Utah failed. And the final use of force bill I'll talk about tonight is SB 106, and that's called Use of Force Amendments. That would require POST, Police Officer Standards and Training Council. POST is a state entity that certifies our officers, all officers in the state. It would require POST Council to establish minimum use of force standards for all peace officers in the state, and agencies would have to comply with those standards and enforce those standards. So I think they're going to go through a rulemaking period where they develop those standards and then they'll be rolled out. So that's use of force. I'm probably behind on time, so I'll pick up the pace just a little bit here. The next category is what I call reporting discipline. And there are 3 bills I think are of interest to this commission. The first is HB 62, titled Post-Certification Amendments. And just as a caveat, all these bills about reporting discipline, they all passed this legislative session. And I think broadly speaking, they get to the idea of trying to capture that information about an officer who may be skipping out on one job under a cloud of suspicion and getting on with another agency without that other agency knowing about the circumstances that led to the officer's departure. So HB 62 says that, and this is just generally speaking, a post can issue a letter of caution, suspend or revoke certification of an officer if it is found by a court or by a law enforcement agency to knowingly engage in conduct that involves dishonesty or deception in violation of a policy of the peace officer's employer or in violation of state or federal law. Now, the addition to current law is this. The same thing as post may do the same with issuing a letter of caution, suspend or revoke certification if it's found by a court or by a law enforcement agency to have knowingly engaged in biased or prejudicial conduct against one or more individuals based on the individual's race, color, sex, pregnancy, age, religion, national origin, disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity. So that if they violate that and they're found to by a court or law enforcement agency knowingly engage in that, they can have their certification revoked. And also, finally, if an agency is aware of this type of behavior, they have to report that information to post. SB 13, so kind of these all kind of work in concert with each other. This one's called Law Enforcement Internal Investigation Requirements. And this is to get to that situation where an officer perhaps pulls the ripcord on employment if they're under an internal investigation and they just want to leave before an investigation is completed and a finding is made and go to a new agency. This says that if an officer's employment terminates either by resignation or otherwise during an open internal investigation regarding the following offenses, then the agency must notify post within 30 days. So those items I just mentioned in the previous bill, as well as the ones that currently exist under law, which is willfully falsifying information to obtain certification, a physical or mental disability affecting that officer's ability to perform their duties, engaging in conduct that constitutes a federal or state crime, refusing to respond or answer truthfully to questions after having been issued what we call a garrity warning in internal affairs investigations. That essentially is a warning saying, if you need to tell us the information in this that we're asking you in this internal investigation, and we are prohibited from turning it over to law enforcement so we don't violate their Fifth Amendment rights. It's a whole area of law I'd be happy to talk about at another time. And other things are also engaging in sexual conduct while on duty or being unable to possess a firearm under state or federal law. Additionally, if a head of an agency or is made aware of any of those allegations, including those new ones we just talked about in the previous law, then they have to conduct an internal investigation. And the results of that investigation, even if that officer leaves, must be reported to post on those particular categories. The final one about employee discipline is called SB 196, Law Enforcement Agency Disclosure Amendments. And what this does is it provides governmental immunity for communication between employees of one or more law enforcement agencies related to the employment, disciplinary history, character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of a peace officer or a former, current, or prospective employee of a law enforcement agency. So it promotes the sharing of information that may be relevant to the new employer that may not be readily apparent. Apparently, there was some concern out there among other departments that they were reluctant to share information for fear of being sued by that particular officer. This provides governmental immunity to prevent, to give them a defense if they are sued. So that is the reporting discipline. I think the rest will be fairly quick. The next is, I've got 3 bills that talk about training. You've probably seen some news articles about some of this stuff. The first is HB 162, and that's called Peace Officer Training Amendments. This passed. This says that agencies shall include no less than 16 hours of training on, quote, mental health and other crisis intervention responses, arrest control, and de-escalation training. So they've got to do at least annually 16 hours of training on those categories. HB 334 is called Special Needs Training for Law Enforcement. This also passed. And this says that annual training that officers get shall cover intervention responses for mental illnesses, autism spectrum disorder, and other neurological and developmental disorders. The last training piece, it's a quasi-training certification piece, SB 38. It's called Canine Policy Requirements, and this also passed. This requires essentially, or incentivizes departments who have canines as part of their toolkit, I guess, that they need to certify the dog and handler to standards that post council will create. They've got to have the agency has to have a written policy on the necessary and appropriate use of canines. And 3, the actions of the handler do not violate against that policy. If they meet all that, then they will get state immunity from liability for canine injuries. Not federal, but state immunity. And the requirements that the state will require is that each canine and handler shall be initially certified and annually certified by qualifying canine certifying entity, whomever that might be. So dog and handler. And finally, post shall create those standards for training, certification, and recertification. So that's the training stuff. The next issue, it's sort of a broader topic, and I will not do it justice because it is so involved. It's a topic of bail reform, and this is something that sort of has popped up recently, and I got to give it just a little bit of history. In the 2020 legislative session, there was a bill called HB 206 that created bail reform. It was fairly large, and the summary of that is that it created a presumption of release from jail for certain criminal offenses. Certain serious offenses still have the presumption of jail, but there was generally a presumption of release of those people arrested for certain criminal offenses. And that took effect in October of 2020. This year, bail reform became a hot topic at the legislature. And what happened was there was a bill, HB 220, that rolled back all of those changes from HB 206. So bail reform went forward. This new bill rolls it back. There were some other bills, HB 207, HB 240, and SB 171 that touched on the issue, but those all failed because HB 220 passed. The next item I'll cover briefly is something I put in the category of police procedures, and I just have the one, and this is HB 245, and it's called Forcible Entry and Warrant Amendments, and it failed. And HB 245 addressed no-knock warrants and created procedures for knock and announce warrants. It discouraged nighttime warrants, and it tried to create a scheme by which these warrants, no-knock warrants or knock and announce warrants might be issued. But that effort failed. Next category is police oversight. And I've got 4 bills, I think, that are related to that. I will note that they all failed. HB 74 was called Municipal Police Oversight Amendments. And this would have amended current state law and provided for the establishment of boards, civilian review boards, essentially, that would have independent authority of the police chief. State law says that they can't have that. A board could be required to review or approve a department's rules, policies, et cetera, before they take effect. State law prevents that right now. That board could veto a policy implemented by the department. State law doesn't allow that. Could require approving a police budget before it takes effect. Again, state law doesn't allow that. And it could also review and approve any contracts with police unions or other organizations. State law doesn't allow for that either. It also would have required that those board members to be elected in a municipal election. And it would have prohibited current or former law enforcement officers or immediate family of those law enforcement officers from serving on a board. So that bill failed. The next one is HB 133. It was titled Law Enforcement Recording Release Amendments. It failed, and this would have essentially required release of body cam recordings capturing those critical incidents involving law enforcement within 10 days. And it also would have required that release when a complaint or legal proceeding is instituted alleging excessive force. HB 283 in this category, Community and Police Relations Commission, this failed. This would have established a state level commission, which would have had a very similar mission as to this commission, but at a state level involving certain defined categories. That bill failed. And the last one was SB 157, Citizens Review Board. This would have provided that the Department of Public Safety provide consultation to those municipalities or counties who wanted to establish a civilian review board. That bill failed. Quickly, 3 more categories, but very, very short. Next category is schools. 2 bills there. There's HB 345 called School Resource Officer Amendments. This bill passed, but I think it shrunk from what a lot of you may have seen it on the school subcommittee in its original state. And I think it kind of winnowed down to something a little bit smaller than what it originally was. This essentially expanded the employees to school personnel who would receive training with respect to SROs, and states that the training program may include training on developing successful relationships with students, as well as legal parameters of searching and questioning students on school property. And then another bill related to schools or SROs is SB 219. And this is called the Truancy Enforcement Moratorium. This would decriminalize certain truancy violations until 2022. That bill passed. Last 2 items, I mentioned briefly the HJR 13, which was the joint resolution declaring racism a moral and public health crisis. That failed. I think it passed out of committee initially, but it stalled at the end and didn't go anywhere. And then SB 102, this is qualifications, peace officer training qualification amendments. This passed. This allows lawful residents who have been in the US for 5 years and who have legal authorization to work. It makes them eligible to apply to post. So certain people, so essentially you don't have to be a US citizen, you can be a lawful resident who have been here for 5 years and have legal authorization to work. And go through that, you may become a police officer. So that's it for my probably too lengthy presentation on bills that might be relevant. If you have any other questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Very, very informative. Commissioners, thoughts, questions for Mr. Cottrell? I have one, maybe I'll get it started. As it relates to all of the requirements for post notification of police officer conduct, et cetera, does post have any ability to sanction police departments should they not do that? Should they not report? Or what would be the sanctioning opportunity or accountability metric or measure that could be used?
I'll take a stab at it, Dante. My hunch is, without doing any research right now, my hunch is yes. I think that we've recently seen an instance where Post tried decertifying the BYU Police Department over some allegations it wasn't complying with certain things. So I believe that if it was deemed that an agency wasn't complying with their rules or state law, that they could risk decertification.
Thank you. And maybe one more. Regarding the training, CIT, de-escalation, and I missed the third one, that the 16-hour requirement, was there any delineation of what should get what hours, or can we just do 1 hour of CIT and the rest in the other 2, or how did they roll that out?
The language does not specify how many hours have to go to each category, which I'll read again. It was mental health and other crisis intervention responses, arrest control, and de-escalation training.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cottrell, could you go back to HB 106? Did you say that passed?
It did, yes. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, wait, I'm looking at SB. Let me look at HB, 1 second.
Did I say SU? I meant HB.
I apologize, Commissioner Johnson. I'm looking at my table. I don't have HB 106 listed. I have an SB 106 under use of.
Maybe that's it.
Okay. That SB 106 passed.
SB 106. Thank you.
Other questions, thoughts?
Hey, Mark. So you're thinking that all the oversight bills failed basically because the prior laws made it illegal? Or was there just no, we're not going to give that to the civilians, give that power to the civilians? What's your thoughts?
It would be impossible for me to divine what everyone's intent was at the legislative session about why certain things didn't go anywhere. It could be a combination of both of those things. I don't know if it would be worth trying to determine the reasons why they failed. I just don't have an answer for you today on that.
You don't have a crystal ball?
I wish.
I got one if you need one.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering though, if it was because something's, a prior law says it's, it's illegal to do that, isn't that what another law would then try to turn that around?
Well, so to answer your question, generally speaking, yes, and we saw that with the bail reform efforts, right?
Yeah,
you saw 206
exactly.
last year get rolled back with a new law. I know with respect to the bill that sought to HB 74, that specifically sought to roll back a bill that was passed either the year or two prior that established what civilian review boards could and couldn't do. And perhaps it just didn't have, obviously didn't have the support because it failed. I'm not sure why it didn't have the support.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
You're welcome.
Just, and I know this is probably not in your area. Did they ever define use of force?
In the bills that I saw, I could certainly take another look at it and answer that question, and maybe have an answer for you by the end of this meeting when I can maybe interject. So I think the answer for me right now is, let me look and see. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. And my second question is, do you know what, I was looking at what the objections were to, was it the one that Sandra Hollins had? Do you know what the objections were to it being a mental health issue, racism being a mental health issue?
Commissioner Shiflett, I do not. I actually was surprised when I did my research today to learn that it actually had not passed, because I knew it had passed out of committee with some fairly good support.
Yeah, I had heard it last week that they didn't pass it, but I was just wondering if you knew what the objections were. So thank you.
I do not. I'm sorry.
I like what Carol brought up, because some of the bills that I've looked at on use of force, it wasn't saying anything about it, like defining it, or it just stayed at the, using a firearm. And when a lot of the literature talks about is those different definitions, what are you collecting? Some may be just yelling at a civilian, maybe the use of force, to that whole continuum. So I'd be interested if any of them did define it, because I know that's a huge gap in the literature.
It's a great question. I will see what I can do after my presentation and see if I can get an answer before the end of your meeting today.
And I don't know, I guess it's up to us to return when they come back to the racism being a mental health. Is it just up to us to go up on Capitol Hill and show them that we're losing our minds? Because it's very, very frustrating, very exhausting, very draining, and it can wear on you. It can wear. So is that up to us, I guess? There's nothing else we can do until Representative Hollins brings it back up next year.
It may be worth speaking with Representative Hollins to see what could be helpful and because it had broad support in the committee and it stalled.
Okay.
And Carol, I can pull it up for you, but we work with several community-based mental health organizations, and there's a couple of national organizations that have clearly stated that racial trauma and is an absolute impactor to mental health, that racism is a mental health issue. And so I can pull it up for you and give you the national organizations that have said that racism is a mental health issue. and the impacts of that. So I can get that too.
Thank you, because I only have one that says that, so I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Shiflett, if I could add to that too, I haven't had a chance to follow up with Representative Hollins post-session, but we are interested in working on at least a city-based resolution to that effect. And we'll be pursuing that in conjunction with the city council. And I think that, we're hoping that other cities will follow suit there too, and that maybe we can build some momentum at the city level and then, try again at the state level next year.
Thank you very much.
And maybe a question, not to put you on the spot, Chief or Lieutenant Zayas, as it relates to any of these, but maybe specifically the training and the Canine and the incentives and post-certification or standards. Do you see any of those impacting what happens in the training division and or how Canine is trained?
I think because of the sensitivities of where we're at with district attorney, I'm not going to comment on that a whole lot. We would support the certification and the suggestions, so that would be good.
No, thank you. I just don't remember, at least as it relates to the 16 hours, what the breakdown in the academy was. So that was my question.
Oh, hey, Dante, on that, we support that very much. We never specify how many hours to each of those categories. But I think what's important is that each agency report back and document how they use that 16 hours and perhaps the curriculums that they train to, which will provide a broad spectrum post-certified training that other agencies can draw from or pull from. And it might be a place where a commission like this can recommend trainings that could be rolled out to different cities to meet that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other thoughts or questions for Mark? Okay, I'm sure some will percolate, Mark. So we'll give you a pause so you can research and answer Carol's questions and others. But we appreciate the presentation and thank you, Rachel. Is there anything else from the city's office?
One thing I would mention, and I think that the council office sent an email out to the commissioners on this topic, but next week at the work session for the city council meeting, there will be a presentation by our human resources director on some recruitment and training efforts that we're making there. And secondly, I would also ask for you to potentially take a look at a budget amendment that we have transmitted to the city council that will also get a hearing next week. It does impact the police department budget, and we want to make sure that you see it and that if you have any questions about it, that I can provide any information to you about it. I will also I'll work with my staff and with the council staff to jointly send you an email with some additional information on that budget amendment, just to make it a little bit easier to parse through.
That would be great. Thank you.
Hey, Dante, can I just mention before we move on?
Yeah.
It's not a question about the legislative session, but I did want to let the members of the commission know that I did participate in a panel discussion about the legislative session and police reform a couple of days ago. We did declare that I was a member of the commission, but that I was there as an individual, just to separate out, speaking for myself and not as a representative of the commission. Hopefully I represented you all professionally. But what I wanted to mention in addition to that declaration is that I believe it's the ACLU has put together 2021 Utah legislative session police reform bills scorecard. And that lists all of the bills, a brief description of them, whether they passed or failed, and then a link to be able to look at those documents. And if it's not on their website now, they intend to put it there. So that's a place where they are all aggregated at one spot. if you want to take a look at that and see them all in there, look out.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much for that very informative presentation. I think it will certainly inform some of the work that the commission has done. Next up is a conversation around community-centered policing, and hopefully you had a chance to peruse the document that was a hyperlink to the document in the agenda with just some various definitions of community policing. And Carol had sent out something, Commissioner Schiffler had sent out something a week or so ago with what she thought was an interesting or a positive definition of community policing. And the word gets thrown, the phrase gets thrown around a good bit without really, to her point about what is use of force. So what is it that we really are saying or meaning when we talk about community policing or community-oriented policing? And so thought that we could have a brief conversation around this and see if there's anything that the commission would like to do in terms of stating its own support for a particular definition, creating a combination of these to create its own definition, something like that. But just thought we could have the conversation. We thought it would be just certainly informational for the commission to really think about what it looks like, what it means, and maybe even present a particular definition to the police department as we go through this work. So Larry was going to kind of lead us in this conversation, so I'll pause and let Larry take it off.
Thank you very much, Dante. And I went ahead and shared my screen that shows the hyperlink that was in the agenda, mainly for the public's benefit, but of course for commissioners as well. And just for maximum accessibility, I thought I would try to read these definitions briefly so that anybody listening could be able to follow. So we have the Obama administration report on 21st century policing's definition.
Larry,
yes.
Could you make the font a little bit bigger for people like Dante to be able to see?
Yes, I see Dante's spectacles, and it might be he needs that. I'll please note in the minutes that the font was expanded at Dr. Prospero's request.
Just a quick comment on the first one. It came from the report. However, it's just a restatement of the Office of Community-Oriented Policing. COPS is what it's called, but it's just a restatement of their definition on their page.
Understood. Community policing is a philosophy that promotes organizational strategies that support the systematic use of partnerships and problem-solving techniques to proactively address the immediate conditions that give rise to public safety issues such as crime, social disorder, and fear of crime. From Everbridge.com, a critical incident management company, community policing is generally defined as a law enforcement philosophy that allows officers to continuously operate in the same area in order to create a stronger bond with the citizens living and working in that area. I'll just briefly mention that I have recently been contracted to work with the Elgin, Illinois Police Department on a similar task force, and it might be worth the commission's looking up, and I might be able to pull it up while we're sitting here, a program there where officers are actually given the opportunity to live in certain areas that they might be patrolling where crime has been a challenge. So I thought that was an interesting approach to kind of take it a step further. The third definition from the Community Policing Consortium defines it as, quote, a collaborative effort between the police and the community that identifies problems of crime and disorder and involves all elements of the community in the search for solutions to these problems. That certainly is in line with what we have been striving to do with you all to involve the community in your work. Community policing is based on the premise that police alone cannot control crime and disorder and promote residents' quality of life. In community policing, in contrast to traditional policing, the public's involvement is viewed as a co-producer of community safety and wellness. Community policing also expands the role of police beyond crime fighting to maintaining order and promoting improved living conditions for residents. And you'll note the members of the consortium that's identified here. These are certainly amongst the most prominent law enforcement organizations that I'm aware of. discover policing within the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Community policing encourages interactive partnerships between law enforcement agencies, their officers, and the people they serve. By developing connections within the community, police are better informed and empowered to solve public safety problems. And for the last one, Dante, would it be appropriate to load this link, or is there more that we should share on?
I don't think it's any different than what number 1 says.
That's what I figured. Okay. So with apologies to anyone with visual limitations, it's interesting to me just to note for the commission's comment that the first 2 definitions are framing it as a philosophy. The third one frames it as an approach or a collaborative effort. And the fourth, similarly, I think is more kind of based on a particular set of activities or actions. I'll also note, and Dante, I'd be interested in your perspective on this, but the one that stood out to me in terms of being a little different than the rest is the third, Community Policing Consortium, which is maybe not a surprise given that it was apparently developed by the law enforcement community, but it's interesting to see how much of a role they're giving the community, not just in helping police do their work, but almost doing the work of policing in tandem, which I think is a powerful notion. I would love first, actually, if I could, to just ask Chief Brown and SLCPD, do you align with any of these? Do you have a definition that you rely upon from a different source? What are some reactions you might have? Chief Brown, Lieutenant?
Thanks, Larry. Yeah, I'm going to, on a break here, I'm going to pull up our definition of interpretation we're trying to enact within the Salt Lake City Police Department touches on almost everyone. The collaborative effort, the cooperation, the community. I think everything that is mentioned here in those definitions is something we're striving for here within the Salt Lake City Police Department and within the communities we serve. So I think those are great definitions, but I'm gonna on my other computer definition we have, and hopefully I can share that with you here shortly.
Sure. And Chief, I apologize. It may be my own internet connection, but parts of your audio were a little spotty. So you may just want to be aware of it.
And if I could just offer a couple of quick comments. And thanks, Chief, for going to look, because I certainly neglected to take a look at the website to see if there was a definition that was on your website. It's interesting that number 1 doesn't mention who the partnerships are with. It does not mention community at all. It just says that there should be use of partnerships, but doesn't mention with who. So I found that interesting. For me, number 2, it just uses a term that I always rail against, which is a stronger bond with the citizens living and working in the area. That term by itself is exclusive. So for me, it's about the residents who live and work in a particular area, not the citizens. And I understand we could be talking about citizens of the world, but that's not how it's understood when folks read this. So just my 2 cents on that.
Well, and that's certainly a great introduction and to the people of Salt Lake City, given the extraordinary number of folks who have resettled in Salt Lake City from other parts of the world and may not have formally attained citizenship as yet.
Or aren't trying to.
Or aren't trying to, right. Commissioners, what, if anything, stands out to you as you look at these, and does one speak to you more than the others, or is there something perhaps that's not present in any that you think needs to be?
I was getting ready to say, it's a shame that there's no standard, so everyone can define or pick and choose. And I think that there needs to be a more clear standard if we're, here in Salt Lake, but across the United States, if we're trying to change the culture, then we've got to have a better standard than, oh, let's pick and choose this one and choose the language that we want.
And Commissioner Shiflett, that makes a lot of sense to me. I guess the question might be, from where should the standard emerge? Meaning, do you see it as something that should be, delivered by, say, the federal government? Should it be coming from, I don't know, states at the state level? Is it non-governmental? What would you see as the best way to affect that standard?
Well, I can't see it coming from the states because the states can't seem to agree on anything. So it's got to be at a higher level, I believe. Whether it should come from the government, possibly, but then you get into the politicians trying to support their states. So I probably need to think about that a little more.
And I didn't expect you to know for sure, but I think that a challenge that exists in this space is, sort of threading that needle between a standard that might be sort of widely adopted by, being developed out of a state entity, and then the challenges of the state sort of, pardon the expression, policing itself, and the appearance of that. So I think there's a lot to think about there. Other
Barry, will you
commissioners,
scroll down so we can see 3 and 4 at the same time, please?
you bet. Yeah.
And I don't know why that font's so big. I'll have to lean back from the screen to be able to. Yeah, I think for me, 3 and 4 together might kind of get close to the solution that we're looking for. I've always been a big believer in problem-oriented policing, where we look at this approach, kind of a hub and spoke kind of a model, where law enforcement is one of the spokes, but the center of the spoke is a center of the hub is a community group, and the other areas can be other community resources, both public and private, that can be leveraged on a given situation to try to address it, right? The understanding that often police can be that entry point to start to examine these problems, but they don't have to maintain all of it. We can put that in the best area with the people with the best resources to address it. I think something similar that we're thinking about as a commission is on mental health services, right? That police may be involved in crisis situations regularly, but we'd like to have mental health professionals be the one that are actually doing that addressing. So I think a model like that, where we can leverage those resources, and then also just a general understanding in the department that every officer is responsible for trying to address the problems that come to them, right? That's part of improving quality of life. That's part of the service we should be giving to a community. Understanding that a patrol officer probably can't do the big ones on their own. So once I start to identify those trends and those patterns, we could go to a group that maybe has more access to more of those resources, but that every officer can and should be looking for a way to solve the issue they have. So what I think happens in law enforcement is the calls come in and it becomes overwhelming, and it becomes a race to try to get to every call as fast as we can, rather than effectively addressing some of the calls that we're on. That maybe if we've got resolution, we don't have to go back to, we can save time in the future, right? And I've kind of floated that idea to this commission before, but that takes a relationship with our community and our governmental leaders to set the expectation with our community members that it might take a minute longer, it may take longer for that officer to get to you. And I know that that's been a battle that the mayor and the commission have been looking at with segments of the community. But I think this shift to department-wide understanding with some expertise, getting the right resources in the right place, really go a long way to setting up a COP. And the rub is, do we call it a philosophy? Do we call it a program? Because it's a little bit of both, right? It's that service expectation with people who specifically do it. And then back to what we've been talking about a lot is the accountability for outcomes too. So that group actually has to deliver, so these cases don't just spin in those areas. And if they're not prioritized, they tend to get punted down the road, and then we don't get that solution. But
Right.
Law enforcement can actually be at the center of that. Excuse me, not the center of that, but a key partner in that. And we can get some resolution, some of these community issues. And that whole legitimacy of policing would be going up, and
Right.
the relationship between law enforcement and the community would be easier for us to manage, rather than these can't really help us, which some members of the community have. So Carol,
Yeah.
I applaud you for bringing this up, but I think somewhere in 3 and 4 is there. And Larry, you and I are talkers, and I kept cutting you off, and I apologize, but
No.
wanted to get those thoughts out there.
Not at all. No, thank you very much, Commissioner. And I just want to capture, I think, 2 threads. One is that police are often expected to respond to a great deal more than they can to meet the expectations that the public may have of them. And so it might be useful to, figure out ways for other non-police actors to respond to certain matters, including mental health. And at the same time, rather than simply responding to a call and reporting on that and filing a report, that we would like for our police to dig into why this trend is happening, what could be a way around it or out of it, so that these calls don't continue, at least at the same pace. I also just
wanted to chime in and say that
yeah.
The Policies and Practice Subcommittee is working on a recommendation right along those lines. And I know, Steve, you weren't able to attend last week, but you informed some of that prior, but have a draft, and we'll be discussing it with our thought partners this week. And so I'd look for that in the next full commission meeting.
Awesome. I'm sorry if I was redundant about.
No,
I apologize for missing.
No, you're in lockstep, Stephen. So thank you.
Yeah, and I was going to say that it's interesting that we began this discussion as how do we define community policing, and I almost think we're talking about how do we define policing, and sort of how do we frame things for the community to understand, what this commission aspires for police to do for all of the community, for that matter. Let me just check in. I want to be mindful of the fact that we have several other topics to. Yes, Chief.
Larry? Okay, before we move away, let me read this, and then I'm going to send this to Coletta so she can share it with you. But this is out of our policy, and it's called Community Supported Policing Philosophy. Crime and public safety are community issues. Therefore, the community and the police must work together with solidarity of purpose to solve them with shared responsibility and participation. Citizens, the police department, other agencies, and city government are equally responsible to help reshape the mission and advance the demonstrable steps. Each entity must be willing to work together, to become involved, to take initiatives, and to cooperate with each other to help make the city more enjoyable and safer for all. Raising the bar over time for the community as a whole. Community supported policing is the heart of this direction and the plan, and is a durable platform for sustained action. Each member of the Salt Lake City Police Department is responsible for achieving its mission, owning the outcome, and providing consideration for unique circumstances. Likewise, the community, in solidarity and shared vision, has a stake in the outcome, provides bottom-up contributions, and shares responsibility for making this city both safer and more enjoyable for everyone. That's how we. That's that's right out of our policy.
Yeah, that's wonderful for you to share that, Chief, and I appreciate your circulating it to the commission. It seems to me like my colleague Josh King and his subcommittee will have a great basis to kind of think through, what the commission would like to say as a statement, if you will, about this whole concept and how it could be, evolved as we move forward and align it with the rest of the recommendations. So I want to just check in with any other commissioner that might want to make a brief comment about what they've seen shared. And then we're going to pivot to a different item on our agenda. Any other commissioners with feedback?
Josh, can we send you our thoughts?
A thumb up, a thumb went up.
Yes.
Oh, I can't see you, Josh.
Yeah.
You need to make a bigger font of yourself.
Don't give him a bigger head than he already had. No, I'm just kidding.
No, that's Steve. Okay. Because
No, but I
have
do
thoughts
think,
about this.
no, that's a very helpful next step, given that the subcommittee is going to take it up. And Josh, I'm sure you'd welcome anyone to participate in that conversation as well. Next scheduled for next Wednesday at 4:00, I believe. So yeah, let's encourage folks who would like to pursue this further to either send comments to Josh King or to participate perhaps in the subcommittee's dialogue. So I will stop sharing my screen for the time being. Actually, yes, I will for the time being. And Dante, I was going to pivot us to the peace pact, if that was in order.
Why don't we pause just to see if there's any public comment waiting?
And not according to what I'm looking at. There don't appear to be any callers. We do have, as we often do, Beverly Hawkins joining us on Zoom. And I wasn't sure whether Ms. Hawkins wanted to share anything with the commission for public comment.
No, thank you. Again, I'm just here observing for the League of Women Voters.
An unbelievable amount of commitment that you've given us, Beverly. Thank you so much, and we really do appreciate it. So Dante, would it be appropriate to go back to item 5? I think it is.
Yes, I think so. Just kind of to wrap up the peace pact conversation, to know if we are in fact making that recommendation to the mayor.
Yeah. So I will endeavor to get this up on our screen just for people's to refresh people's memory. But this is a topic that's been brought up a couple of times here with this group. Oops, it's asking me to sign up for something, so I already have. Here is the kind of acronymic way of talking about this. And Dante, again, this is the African American Mayors Association who originated this, I believe.
Correct.
So from what I understand, at least, is it 2 of the subcommittees that have already weighed in support of having Mayor Mendenhall sign this?
Training subcommittee has, and I also believe, Josh, your subcommittee as well. Is that correct?
Yes,
I'm sorry. No, Siobhan's subcommittee initially had said yes, I believe, correct?
yes,
Yes.
Dante, thank you. We reviewed it on our call and discussed it, and subcommittee members were asked to come today to give input or vote on it.
No, it was, if your subcommittee has already discussed it and knows what it wants to do, then I think we're in business.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if your subcommittee needs some further conversation, now would be the time.
Right.
So for either members of the policy subcommittee or other commissioners that haven't been part of another discussion, we'd welcome comments on the peace pact.
Is Commissioner Powell on the phone?
I don't believe so.
He was
I don't see Commissioner Powell.
and discussed it, and
I believe we already discussed the peace pact. Didn't we already vote on it, Josh?
yeah, we did. And sorry, Dante, maybe I understood. I didn't speak up. Our subcommittee was asked to come ready to vote on it, and so I think, as Commissioner Johnson said, they're ready to move forward.
Oh, okay. So, so your committee needs to officially decide or make the decision today? Okay, so I would suggest pause and let your committee do what it needs to do.
All right, I see the committee, all in favor of the peace pact from the Policy Practice Subcommittee. Commissioner Johnson.
Aye, I'll go again. Yes.
Andrew Weirden.
Yes. Sorry.
All right. I'm scrolling through a lot of names now and not seeing any others. So
I'm in favor. I missed the meeting, but we discussed it 2 weeks ago in the big meeting, and I'm in favor.
Yeah, so we've got Commissioners Johnson, Shiflett, and Angel Weirden all voicing support. I don't know if there are other subcommittee members.
Oh, there's Manuri. Sorry, I didn't recognize that nice design. Manuri.
In agreement.
Thank you.
Does anybody have input that we haven't heard from on this? Well, my thanks to my colleague for bringing this forward, and I think Mayor Mendenhall appears poised to join it, and that seems like a very helpful step forward in this work. So the minutes will reflect. I will stop share. I think I'm glad we were able to get through that efficiently. I think there's an item on here related to listening sessions and focus groups. I will be extremely brief and just share with you one last bit of data that had been compiled here a couple of weeks ago, but just to kind of put it all into a single perspective. You see a couple of bar graphs up on the screen. This represents the compiled responses across both the telecasts we did, as well as folks on the phone, folks texting, folks online, in terms of their feedback. So you'll see that when we were asking about training priorities, there was a significant amount of support for crisis intervention with about close to 45%, and then about 25% said cultural competency or implicit bias. 17 or so % said community interaction, and a lower % said either firearms or other. As it relates to officer recruitment, folks felt that a more welcoming culture would be the best priority, followed by better pay and benefits or stronger outreach. When it comes to the other responses, when we were able to get them, I'll have that for you summarized here in just a minute. This graph just shows the self-identified ethnicity or race that folks gave when they participated. This is not necessarily every single person that was joining, but it is everyone who responded. So you see about 60% white, about 15% identifying as Hispanic, Latino, or Chicano, or Latina, Chicana, and then some others there. And then this breaks down participation by neighborhood. As you can see, Northwest Quadrant and Central City were a little bit more represented than others, but it was a fairly good spread across the community. And then I wanted to just share with you this other document, which was our attempt to develop a list of sort of summary themes that came from comments made in all different formats. And where it says proposed FAQ text, this is a text that I and the team developed as a way to help us respond to these comments. And I will broaden the size font, forgive me. But this represents kind of the collection of several comments from different folks. And then this is proposed text that we might use in a frequently asked questions document meant for the community to be able to feel that their concerns were heard and responded to. And I know that the city and our team is working on a thorough set of responses here. And for those where there was a request for an individual response, we are also working to get those responses. So you had treatment of citizens with either disabilities, special needs, and mental illness, better de-escalation, particularly with students and young adults, general non-lethal and or non-physical interaction with citizens, racial profiling and disparate treatment during stops, better screening of potential officers to try to ward off folks with some form of extremist views, a penchant for violence, and so on. Better resources and options for the police to help address both homelessness and gang activity, cultural sensitivity when dealing with communities of color, the sensitive handling of individuals in distress. There was particular praise for the police department in a couple of particular episodes. Praise and concerns about the Citizens Academy and depictions of communities of color. That was spoken about, I think, Dante, wasn't it in training subcommittee that matter came up, I believe? Okay. And then disparate responses to calls for police assistance. So not just disparate treatment of police during a call, but the speed with which police respond to a call for assistance, and a call for better working relationships with the refugee community. And Commissioner Engelweirden and I have been talking about a potential future session with that population. I will say also that we are still in the process of working out with the city kind of our next moves, but we hope that we can continue to engage in some other listening sessions if at all possible, or at the very least empower commissioners to hold some of their own. I also think that this would be particularly useful to the different subcommittees to sort of make sure that for the ones that feel most relevant to your subcommittee, that your recommendations are addressing these themes, because this is what the community is asking you to do. And so I encourage you to keep this PDF document either bookmarked or downloaded as a way to track the recommendations your subcommittee is making, and see to it that you're doing your very best to address it with your recommendations. So I think that is the sum total of what I was going to report there, and I can hand it back to Dante and Moises on literature review.
Before you do that, Larry, do you have an update on our listening session that we wanted to develop?
Commissioner Johnson, I do still have the time held for the, as you and I had discussed, but I am awaiting the sort of green light from folks in terms of my particular ability to engage. So I will visit with you offline about the best way to proceed. But rest assured, we are committed to having the Utah Black Chamber, be a part of this process, and we'll just figure out the best way to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Larry. Thank
You
you,
bet.
Larry.
I have a question.
Sure.
So Larry, on those charts, those bar charts, does that include all the participants now?
Yeah, that good question. I mean, in response to your question to me at one of the last couple of commission meetings, I went in and sort of took the two different data sets, basically phone and text online, and merged them. So yes, it represents all aggregated. So
that question where how were interactions with Salt Lake City PD, and it's only 16% saying bad. You feel that's accurate on what the people were reporting on both types of?
Yeah. So just for everybody's reference. I'm sorry, I lost it. My goodness, folks, I apologize. I don't know why it's cutting away. The aggregated results there showed that around 32% viewed their interactions with the PD as great, another 33 or so as okay, about 18% as bad, and then another 15% did not have any sort of reference point.
And so that's with all the combined data that you've had.
That's correct.
All right.
And I will say, just for everybody's information, slcrepcommission.com is still very much active. And so we encourage anyone watching the meeting and all of our commissioners to continue to spread the word that we are still able to accept additional input as well as survey responses at slcrepcommission.com. So we encourage everyone to visit it.
All right. Thank you, Larry. Commissioner Prospero was going to talk briefly about the best practices that he has found in his literary church. I would love to, if we need to extend the time for this into the next session, that would be great. I really do want to get into the school safety's recommendations. So
as y'all can tell by the coded language, I have been pushed to the next session. Actually, I did want to wait till the next one because I wasn't able to prepare for this week because you ordered me last time to have a nice presentation, and I spent too much time on our next topic right now regarding our recommendations. So
triggered mode oppositional defiance, huh?
I see his defensive mode is kicked in. So okay. We appreciate the totality of your interaction on the commission. So thank you, sir. So we will move that to the next agenda item. So moving to the subcommittee reports. Just briefly, training is still working on receiving data as it relates to the hiring practices of the city. It's kind of a general comment. Other subcommittee members, anything that might be a benefit for understanding for the rest of the commission? Okay. Policies?
A quick update, just building on what I mentioned before. We've had a subcommittee meeting and also a separate session with our thought partners out of Los Angeles and Pepperdine, and have developed several draft recommendations that we'll flesh out with a second session in the next week, and should come back with some recommendations for the full commission to consider.
Great, thank you. Youth Subcommittee, anything to share?
Yes, just a quick comment. Good evening. Last week, we met with the SROs for the first time and introduced ourselves. We also began to discuss the Peace Pact, in which some members of the SROs were hesitant to have an open discussion. I can understand that sometimes it could be hard to share your opinions, and it could be tough with everybody. But we also need to understand that we need to be having these tough dialogues to really get to the center of inequity. During the meeting, some of the other commission members helped encourage the SROs to participate, and we, as the Youth Subcommittee, would like to extend that invitation once again. We would like to make sure we understand that this is an open dialogue and we want to have these tough conversations. We also want to make sure that when we do participate, that we are all caught up with the materials or the readings that we are discussing, just so we're all familiar and kind of have the same ground to stand on and have discussions, you know, same talking points, same areas to know about.
Thank you, sir. And finally, Siobhan and the School Safety Subcommittee.
Yes, we have a couple of recommendations we want to bring forth to the full commission. I think that Moises has volunteered to be our spokesperson in this case. Moises, would you like me to share my screen, or do you know?
Nicole's supposed to be doing it.
Oh, sorry, it was Nicole. You're right. You're right. I just like to pick on you. It was Nicole. Nicole, do you want me to share my screen to show them, and you can go along that way? Okay, I will do that.
Stop picking on poor little me.
Well, you know, I almost got out of it. And if I get a chance to pick on you, you know I will.
Is that large enough for everyone to see? There we go. Okay, and just let me know when you want me to move it along, Nicole.
Yes, the School Safety Subcommittee has been doing a lot of reading, a lot of talking to community partners. We've had a meeting with the interim superintendent and some Salt Lake City School District board members and staff members, administrative members, discussions with SROs. We had the SROs in our School Safety Subcommittee for the first time last week. And as Commissioner Romero indicated, that there was some hesitancy to be open about opinions in these subcommittee meetings. And we did, of course, we cannot guarantee that any of the discussions in our subcommittee meetings are going to be a safe space, but we want it to be a productive space. And so we're hoping that there's going to be some more trust building with our SRO representatives, so we can have some productive discussions. And I think it did become productive near the end. I hope that we can continue. But in all of our discussions, reading our reports, talking to various stakeholders, we have created a number of recommendations. These are the two that are ready for review by the larger commission. There's several that are still works in progress, and we're hoping to be able to get to those sooner rather than later, because they are going to be necessary for some of the work we want to see happen. The first one is that in our research, we discovered there is still a continued racial disparity in students that are cited in schools by SROs. The overall number of citations has decreased dramatically. It really has. Compared from 2013, 2020 is a bit of a rare anomaly, but even in 2019, there was a decrease overall, which is positive. We don't want to see children cited. We don't want to see them referred to juvenile court. We don't want them to have a juvenile record. So it is a positive thing to see that citations have reduced. However, there is still a racial disparity when it comes to children who are of Hispanic Latino descent. There were some disparities with children of other racial backgrounds, but the reduction in the numbers was not as, or the disparity was not as noticeable as it was with Latino and Hispanic children. Go ahead and move down. So the recommendations that we do have right now is that we need to make sure that the memorandum of understanding that exists currently between the Salt Lake City School District and the Salt Lake City Police Department is renewed and renegotiated. The terms of the memorandum of understanding contain some promising language, but we do need to make sure that the MOU is going to be continued for at least through the next school year, probably beyond that. Right now it was slated to expire in February, and there's some discussion, some disagreement as to whether it expired in February or whether it expired at the beginning of the following 2021-2022 school year. Regardless, it has been extended through at least the summer so that the new superintendent, when he does come on board, will have a chance to review it and be involved in some of these discussions of renegotiation and renewal. We are hopeful that we can include some more, some additional recommendations for training. It's ongoing. It's an ongoing discussion, but we would like to see that extended at very, very least. Two commissioners were invited to attend the SRO Oversight Committee. That was very useful to see. They're currently only happening, I think, twice a year. Some of our informal discussions have included maybe adding additional oversight committee meetings to help address problems in a more timely manner, but that is something that would come under the MOU discussions. Any questions about that first recommendation? Comments?
Just real quick, Nicole, one of those things, one of the tasks that were given to the oversight committee is to actually create performance measures for SROs. Basically, what is a successful program? And they don't have that right now. And so we'll be part of that group to be able to develop those accordingly.
Correct. And something else to add is we've been talking a lot with the Salt Lake City School District's data person and the Salt Lake City PD's data person. We don't think that a lot of data really exists for us to know the full extent of how SROs are involved in the school discipline process. The MOU as it stands really prohibits SROs from being used as a discipline measure. They're really supposed to be for a safety purpose, not for a child who has a cell phone in the classroom and won't put it away or is refusing to sit in their desk. It's supposed to be for fights. For people coming on campus who shouldn't be on campus. But again, we don't know how often those SROs are used by teachers who maybe aren't trained well enough or who just ignore the training and involve SROs in school discipline when they should not be. So we do want to work with the Salt Lake City School District to maybe gather that data, start gathering that data, and that would be something that would be included in our involvement with the SRO Oversight Committee, is to make sure that the SROs are being used in accordance with the MOU. Because you don't know what you don't know, and right now we have really no data to indicate how they are being used and whether they're being abused. Really, that's one of our concerns as well. Are they being misused? We don't want them to be misused for sure. Any other questions?
Yeah, I want to know if the new superintendent that's coming into the Salt Lake City School District will have a chance to review this and make changes, or is this in stone?
The MOU is not in stone. The old one is still in effect. The hope is that the new superintendent would be able to review it and be involved in the revisions, renegotiation, renewal process. That's our hope. And from what I have heard, just based on the news that I've read, he wants to take a very trauma-informed approach to teaching, which is perfectly in line with how the subcommittee feels the MOU, the SRO program should be anyway. And we're hopeful. We're really hopeful that he can have some influence in how this MOU is implemented and how it is drafted.
He's got his resume is just outstanding. He's been everywhere. So I think we're in for a change, a positive change.
But we've been, we asked how quickly we could get in to see him, you know, maybe next week. And we were told, calm down, let's get through, let him get started in June and we can talk then. But I know Siobhan and I were really excited to be able to talk with him sooner rather than later.
And he'll have to sign off on this anyway, so they will be involved.
Right, he will be involved.
Just a question on the school-based law enforcement training. Who provides that? As I recall, what struck me when we talked with those who were SROs or had been SROs, they all said they didn't get any training. Where does this training come from? And do all SROs get it, or is it school site-based, or how does that look?
You know, I can't recall exactly who it was. I know that the superintendent let us know that from what he knew, the SROs and administration were in the same room receiving the same training on this MOU.
No, Moises has information on that too. Moises, do you want to jump in?
Yes, I'm one of the trainers that does that throughout the state.
We need to start over there.
Yeah, but we have not done Salt Lake City in quite a few years.
Steve, do you know? Oh, I'm sorry.
And when they did the MOU training, I want to say that was probably 3 years ago, maybe 2, but it's been quite a while that they both have sat and done the school-based law enforcement training and the training specific to that MOU, which is the one that they have right now currently. And, you know, there's turnover. There's a lot of turnover.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, we provide training throughout the whole state.
Okay. Mark?
Thank you. I just wanted to add, I have been part of the in-person MOU training, so training just to what the MOU says with the school district that included both SROs and school district personnel. We didn't do one this past year, I think in 2020, but the year before. So, and I know there's one scheduled for the end of the month on the MOU that I'm going to be participating in.
Okay. And I certainly don't know what's in the MOU, but I guess my question is, do they receive training or do they have conversations around how to engage with the kids versus what you can or can't do, which is how to be that person that the kids hopefully look up to, or at least look to for answers to them.
Right. So my understanding is that the MOU itself includes specific requirements for training for each SRO before they're, allowed to be an SRO, and that does include adolescent development. As we know, the adolescent mind is very different from the child mind and the adult mind. So there does need to be specific training on the adolescent mind, and that is part of the training in the MOU itself. And the SROs are picked by the Salt Lake City Police Department, but the school district does have some sway in whether an SRO remains or whether they get a new SRO. I know there was an issue with one SRO at one school where the school district said, we do not want this SRO in our school. This person is being highly inappropriate with how they speak with the students. And they were able to get that SRO removed. So that there is some collaboration in how the SROs are chosen. Some are not good fits for certain schools, others are better fits. But there is some specifics as to the trainings that the SROs are supposed to receive before they become SROs in a school.
Dante, the truth is that they don't get the training before they become that, which would be ideal. Usually they're in the school already and they try to figure it out. And I'm not just saying SROs because they're supposed to take it with their school administrator.
Right.
Because oftentimes they're the ones that are inappropriately bringing law enforcement into non-law enforcement issues. And there's a huge list of things that the law says that they should receive this training. It is so much training. probably require 40 hours to do it. And so to have an administrator and that SRO out at the same time for that long is fairly hard. So districts have done it differently. Like Granite School District, what they did is that they started with the basics, which is a lot of what I provide is what is the role of the SRO? Law enforcement role is a very small time of that SRO. Most of it is in informal counseling, building those relations, being a mentor, doing a lot of prevention, being able to do referrals to counselors and mental health providers because they identify youth that are having a tough time. That's really most of their work. And then student rights, talk about, what does it mean? Who can search? Who can question? What does all that look like? A lot on the MOUs, but then you can only do that for 4 hours or so. And so what Granite did is like every month, part of their professional development, they bring 2 more hours. It could be adolescent development, 2 more hours, trauma-informed care, 2 more hours. And they spread that out throughout the whole school year, which is pretty neat because it's really hard to get everybody all at once. Others have done 4 hours one time, and 6 months later do 4. Some just do it one time, one and done. Gracias, catch you later. So it's tough because of course both already do a lot of training, meaning educators and law enforcement officers. So one of the nice things to do is what Salt Lake City did do is that they trained specifically to that MOU. But yeah, it's been a while and there's been a lot of turnover. So I'm glad to hear that Mark is going to do that again. Mark, and hopefully Christy will be there as well. So.
Yeah, and ideally, we would like to see some extensive training for these SROs and to have more community input on who is going into a school. I know there was discussions that we had about students and parents. I mean, at very least, parents having some say over which SROs go to their schools. That's not a formal recommendation yet, but that's something that we were hoping to maybe work with in the MOU.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could just add, I co-teach with, I want to say it's just so everyone on the commission knows that we also do that through our nonprofit. I've not had the chance to teach in Salt Lake probably since 2015. I think we were doing a pilot program. Dr. Christie at the time, Suarez, and just so everyone knows that what my involvement was.
Thank you. Thank you. So I can't tell, is there a recommendation in number 1 or not yet?
So the recommendation right now is to extend it and renegotiate it. We need to have that MOU renegotiated for sure.
Okay.
Move that one forward as a final recommendation. We presented it here as a draft, and even though we've gotten word that it has been extended in the interim, just wanted to formalize that here in our documentation that we did recommend that, and it sounds like that's already going forward. We just wanted to put a period on that sentence.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that obviously it's tricky to negotiate something, from afar and not be formally part of the negotiation. But I think it would be helpful for the subcommittee to give as many recommendations as they feel is necessary for what that renegotiated agreement should have in it. And also, I was just trying to make sure I understood how far it's been extended. Is it extended through the remainder of this school year, but would expire August 21? Would it go for another school year?
My understanding is it's extended through the end of this school year, so through the summer.
Yeah, so I mean, all the more reason that I think the subcommittee should really give as much detailed recommendation as they think is necessary to what should be in that agreement.
Agreed. And with our SRO partners just having joined our group last week, I think we have an opportunity to have those conversations collaboratively and come up with some really great things that will be of value between the two groups.
Yeah, that was one of our hesitations in providing some very specific recommendations of what should go into the MOU, is because we didn't have data from the school district. We didn't have feedback from the SROs themselves. We didn't have a lot of feedback from the students either. We want to have some feedback from the students who had interactions with SROs before we started making a bunch of some very specific recommendations. You know, a recommendation may not benefit the students, may not benefit the SROs, may actually inhibit the SRO's effectiveness. And if our goal is to have safer schools and to have children having positive interactions with law enforcement, we don't want to be contraindicative of those two goals. So that's why we have not been incredibly specific in these, is we still need a lot more information, and we just started working with our SROs. And I think we will be able to come up with some more specific recommendations in our upcoming subcommittee meetings.
Yes, our second recommendation is very specific though, so we probably need to save some time for that second one if people are ready to move to that one.
Why don't we go ahead and do that just so we can hear what those that recommendation is, or those are.
So the second it concerns the school to prison pipeline. It runs really close to our runs right with our school safety subcommittee goals. Right now, there are two programs. There's the Promising Youth Project and there's Pure Court. The Promising Youth Project, and I'm not going to read what's on the screen, but it's a prevention program, and it works with youth who are gang involved, gang affiliated, at risk for gang affiliation, and it provides support and mental health services to them, helps them gain life skills. The goal is to keep them from becoming referred to the juvenile court system or becoming part of the larger juvenile or the larger justice system as adults. Right now, they are housed under the Salt Lake City Police Department. And the problem with being housed under the Salt Lake City Police Department is many of the youth do not want to go into the public safety building. It's not a safe space for them. They don't feel comfortable meeting with the youth outreach workers there. So not a lot of good work is going to be done if they're not willing to go to the public safety building. Additionally, under the umbrella of the Salt Lake City Police Department, there have been some budgeting and space issues. There's currently not enough space for offices for the workers, not enough in the budget for their for basic things like tools, cell phones, laptops, those sorts of things. Our recommendation specifically is to move them out from under the Salt Lake City Police Department umbrella, put them under the city's umbrella. Currently, the city has, and I'm going to say this wrong, but I believe it's the Youth and Family Division under the city. Currently, the city has some funds that they could use to help them find office space. There are several programs, community programs in town that have office space to rent that would work perfectly with this program. Pulling them out from under the Salt Lake City Police Department will give them more flexibility in how to run their program, will make the youth feel safer in going to the offices to work with the workers, to gain those life skills, be a more effective program. And like, this is a very, very long list of recommendations. I can read each of them specifically just so that it's for accessibility purposes. But we want to improve the PYP's ability to recruit qualified and passionate staff who can most effectively bond with the students. Like I said, that's an impairment right now that they have under the Salt Lake City Police Department. Reduce barriers for youth participation who require a safe space to meet with their advocates or receive mental health services. Youth coming into the police department offices is a barrier. There are some who refuse to go into the public safety building for individual sessions, for just general meetings. And obviously, if they're not willing to meet at an office, they're not going to get the help that they need. The program needs to be given adequate space and resources, like I said, such as computers, cell phones, desks, curricular risk assessments, et cetera, to more effectively meet the needs of the youth they're currently serving and to expand their program to serve more youth.
Nicole, before you move on to the next one, I just want to point out this is posted on the Salt Lake City website for this board. So if people are following along at home, and this is a wordier one, if you want to go through and read it in detail, it is posted there for the public, and I believe was also sent to the commission. So,
can I interrupt? I have a question.
Yes.
Where is the mental health staff coming from? Who's providing that staff?
So people are just being hired. They're hired by the program. Ashley Fletcher is the woman who is running the program. And she's been working with a small group of advocates and workers. So they're the ones who are providing it. And I believe Ashley is, and I think she's an LCSW.
Okay.
I think I remember seeing that.
She's working on her master's degree right now. But Tanya, they got a COPS grant and they got I think it's a USBE grant to hire their advocates.
Okay.
And so that's what again, so they would, so they got their funding already. And so basically just be moving into the city itself. The problem with that first one is because they're part of PD, it's extremely hard to get qualified individuals to get through that police
the background checks.
Yeah, the background checks, and it takes so long that even if they do pass it, by the time they get to them, they're gone. And some of these, some of the great advocates out there may not have the cleanest of backgrounds, but yet they're good people, and they've learned, and they're probably one of the best mentors out there, and they can't pass it. So going through the city, they'll still have to pass through some background, but not as extensive as PD.
Not as
Okay.
rigorous.
And the mental health workers have worked with youth, or they have had that experience in their training.
And that's what Ashley's looking for.
Right. That's
And then-
what Ashley's looking for. Yes.
Yeah, and then that's what that's what I really like about Ashley. She knows what best practices, especially working with youth and gang involved youth. And so she knows what risk assessments to use, what best practice to implement, how to use case management, and how to document to ensure that there's quality control and be able to evaluate the program.
And who best to hire too. That's the other thing about her is who best to hire. As Commissioner Prospero said, is some of the best mentors and advocates for these students and these youth are adults who were like them at one point and may have a criminal record, but have since returned to school and obtained advanced degrees, become therapists themselves. She's very good at knowing who to hire and who can best fill those positions. But like Commissioner Prospero said, there's some major barriers in having it connected to PD instead of the city.
Yeah, I understand that because back in the day, I should say, I worked with the gang involved kids, and it's a hard thing and mentally challenging. And also you have to also deal with the parents too, who don't get it. So that's why I was asking, like, do you have the staff who, has experience?
Yeah, I mean, that's what that's part of our recommendation, so that she can build that staff faster and better for these youth, because this is an absolutely necessary program in our opinion to help decrease that school to prison pipeline. And right now it's being hindered. And I don't want this to be indicative on the Salt Lake City Police Department. They have specific requirements for background checks for a reason, and we don't see a need to change that for sure. But in this case, for this program, it is a barrier for this program to be really fully successful.
Okay. And sorry, full of questions now. You have what's it called? The PYPs. So will the youth be talking to or going to talking to inmates, or what are they called? Will they be like doing like a scared straight kind of situation?
No.
Okay.
No.
I was just
No
like,
way. No,
I was just checking because I was like, oh man,
No,
that's a lot of liability.
I don't think we would support a scared straight sort of program. I don't think any data exists to support the efficacy and validity of a program like that. No, this is a very different trauma-informed sort of program that includes evidence-based programming. Not scared straight. I would not support a scared straight program.
Okay, thank you.
Personally, yeah, you're welcome. I know it was big in the day, but no. So we do want to see increased funding for this program. They do need more funds to be able to hire additional staff and have the equipment necessary to be able to be more effective. Let's see, we also recommend that the SROs who are currently working with the program be allowed to continue to work with those youth during the summer. what the program has found is that the SROs work with them during the school year, and then the summer hits, and when the school year restarts, the SROs are rebuilding those relationships, having to reestablish rapport with all of these students, and it's like starting over. It really hinders the program's ability to work with the students and the SROs. So we do want to see that be able to occur throughout the summer, and I know that some of the SROs who can work with the students during the summer, it's based on a seniority basis only. So some of them have to go back to patrol or back to property crimes or whatever, but we want to see them be able to continue to work with these youth throughout the summer. Moving this program to the city will allow continued a lot more communication between the city and the program itself, and having these SROs involved will allow the city and the program to continue to have additional ongoing communication for the benefit of those youth. Any other questions about the PYP program? Because it really is an excellent program, and we want to see it succeed for our youth's sake.
I think it sounds amazing. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And just a comment as it relates to increased funding for the program, given the conversation that we had with, and I don't remember her name, around budget and specific ability to maybe define dollars. I would just suggest or encourage that conversation happen prior to maybe the presentation of this. If there could be specific dollars in the document, it might be helpful.
And I think that makes a lot of sense, Dante. I do. And I think Ashley Fletcher, the program's director, probably already has in mind exactly how many people she needs and at what level. She was pretty specific about the current budget that constraints she was under. So I think she has an idea of how much money she needs for equipment. I know that there are some discussions as to office space right now and what those costs would look like. But I think that Commissioner Prospero and I can talk with her and get some solid dollar amounts to present to the council. And I think that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. And even, I'm not sure if they said they needed specific dollars, but if you could identify the specific things that would need to be funded, then they could put a dollar amount to that.
Right.
Yeah, Dante, because right now they do have the funding for the personnel, but it's on soft money, so it's grants, right? So, at least for now, for a few years, they'll be fine. But what they don't have is for what we wrote in there, equipment, which I'm sure they could easily figure out. Although I think they did get some recently, but also, paying for the curriculum. All that's, curriculum is expensive a lot of times. That's how researchers get rich. The risk
tools,
assessments.
The assessments,
they use the YASI, and so that all that costs money. So that we could definitely easily give to those financial folks, and I'm sure they could pop something. And so that really is not that much money. Once that funding goes away, then that's a few years out, and so they could figure that piece too.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks.
The final program that we want to see come under the city umbrella's peer court, it's restorative justice. I'm sure many of you have heard about this. It is incredibly effective at combating youth who are involved in the juvenile justice system. So rather than being referred to the juvenile court, it allows students to go under the umbrella of peer court, to go under the jurisdiction, I guess, of peer court for minor offenses, and to be able to have a punishment, a consequence that is that fits the offense that was committed. So we do want the peer court program to come under the city's sort of umbrella, have increased funding for this program. I don't think we have any sort of specific dollar amounts for this one of how much it would cost. I believe a lot of it is really just volunteer basis. There's the costs are pretty minimal from what I know about the peer court program, but having this program and the PYP both under the city's umbrella would help to have that, again, that increased communication to help both those programs be able to work together, work with the Salt Lake City PD as necessary. And our ultimate goal is to be able to have a full-time employee who focuses just on the school to prison pipeline issue and education. And then we would be able to have that full triumvirate of city and PD and Salt Lake City School District working together on this one major issue of the school to prison pipeline, which does disproportionately affect our children of color.
Yeah, and that recommendation is still in draft form because the city has made a few hires recently that we're trying to make sure we understand what those hires are meant to do. And so that our recommendation can be appropriate when we do bring it forward as final for that full-time employee.
And we're also seeking input from other community stakeholders of what they would like to see in that position, how it would make their jobs easier. So like with the Salt Lake City School District Administration, if we bring someone in who's not going to be particularly helpful for them, then why bring someone on board? We want to make sure that all of this complements each other and no one's duplicating work. It's more of a collaborative, cooperative effort.
I was going to ask you if you are working with Journey of Hope and with the organization Utah for Black Girls with, gosh, what's her name? Michelle Loveday. So Michelle Loveday is another person, Nikki Walker, and then Journey of Hope. That is what they do. That is what Shannon does every day. She works with incarcerated women and youth. And if you need her connection, I'll definitely connect you because that's why she started her organization. She's retired law enforcement, and that's what she does.
Please forward us that contact information. We'd love to talk to as many people as we can as we had.
I'll do an email introduction.
I appreciate that.
Oh, wait, need your emails. Oh, I have it. Never mind.
You can just send it to me and I can distribute to the group too if you don't have everybody's. Any further conversation on this? Thank you, Commissioner Salazar Hall, for presenting this to the group. Any questions from the full commission on what this would mean or thoughts on this type of recommendation for discussion? I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment so I can see all of you, but I'm happy to bring it back up if there's discussion we need different items. And I'll pass it back to Dante for the process here. I just want to make sure we could answer any questions.
Thank you. And I said this before we went live on the call, but I was chair of the board for one of the first peer courts in the country, and I can absolutely speak to the efficacy and the absolute positive changes and outcomes that it makes. So it's a wonderful program.
Oh man, Dante, I was so supportive of peer court, and now you had to just ruin my image of it. Thanks.
Activated that oppositional defiance again.
Right, yes, sir. Okay, so I guess, Shimon, what is it specifically that the subcommittee is asking of the commission in this regard?
Well, I think we'd like to formalize these and be able to move them and present them to council as final. However, we understand that this most recent one has not yet been presented here as draft. So if the commission would like more time to consider or discuss, we can talk about that. But we would like to continue moving these forward if possible, especially knowing that there's financial considerations and that would be beneficial in where the city's at with its budget process, as we learned. So.
Thank you. So commissioners, your thoughts? Are you comfortable, ready to say yes? Or do you need more time for additional review, thoughts on your questions that you may have, et cetera?
Sorry, I moved to forward it. I think it's excellent. And I think we do need to get it out there as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Dante.
No, you
well,
did
maybe
not.
I did, but hey.
Just interrupt him.
No, you did perfectly. So my wife cuts me off all the time, so you're good.
Oh, okay.
So other commissioners would love to hear your thoughts, please.
Maybe I just would recommend it as an efficiency measure to just hear from any commissioner who had concerns about moving this forward. I mean, Commissioner Hawkins has made the recommendation. If there's anybody that's feeling any hesitancy about it going forward, I think it would be great to hear that. And if there isn't anyone, then I think that it would probably be appropriate to move it forward.
I
And
agree.
so
I don't see anything wrong with scared straight.
Okay.
Right?
Let's, can we debate that at a different meeting?
Thank you.
Do I understand that we're looking to move all three forward, the support of the MOU, the importance of it, required by state law, and continuing evolution of that to make sure it's meeting for our students. Okay. And then moving, promising youth under the authority of the city to increase efficiencies, and they have the space and the technology to reach these kids, place that the kids feel more comfortable going, and a continuity of service over the summer by maintaining that relationship. And then improving the relationship of peer court with the city, ideally at some point down the road under the umbrella of full-time person that manages school to prison. That's the case I'm in favor of.
Thank you. Just a quick question before we continue. On number one, the second bullet, I guess my question is that memorialized in the MOU that it will happen twice a year, this collaboration, or not?
Yeah, the Oversight Committee meeting twice a year is specifically in the MOU. The more we talk with the school district, with the new superintendent, and with our SROs, we're probably going to end up recommending that they meet more often, like probably monthly, and likely have a new person take over the Oversight Committee responsibilities. Currently, it is being handled by Dr. Sandra Buendia, and she frankly has so much on her plate. She does not have the capacity to be able to run this effectively, not to the level that she wants to see it happen. I know she's very much committed to the goals of positive outcomes for youth, and she just does not have the capacity to be able to do it. She wants to see it happen, but it's just not possible. So we may end up having an additional recommendation to have somebody else take over running that Oversight Committee. Possibly it might be under the job description of the new FTE that we're proposing.
Okay, I guess my only thought is it's a statement, it's not a recommendation, so I'm not sure it fits under that category with a bullet point. I mean, I don't want to confuse and have more questions asked by council or the mayor than not. And so if it's not a recommendation, I'm not sure it fits just right.
Yeah, and I guess we can change the wording there. We just wanted to make sure that those were memorialized because they've come up in conversation a number of times and we've had a lot of discussion about it, but there's no kind of official place where those live. And the MOU extension has sort of already happened, so it seemed odd to recommend something that's already happened, as well as the invitation to be on to be a part of that discussion for the Oversight Committee. That invitation's been extended. So just wanted to find a place to put them in writing that makes it official without, but no action is needed. You're absolutely right, Dante. So we can change the wording to make it more appropriate when we move it forward if the group thinks that's better.
I think it'd be great to reflect that that's the accomplishment of this commission. I did have the opportunity to sit in on one of those meetings. I think it'd be
We're losing your audio a little bit, Steve.
Man, I was afraid I'd say something to trigger Mo's oppositional defiance disorder, but can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I think it's important to codify that as an accomplishment of the commission, because being able to participate with that group is huge. I did have the opportunity to sit in on one of those meetings, and it was great, and I think it'd be valuable to have representatives from this group participate with them regularly. I think there's a lot of value in it.
Thank you. Other commissioners, is there any other?
You jumped back.
Dante, you're muted.
You somehow remuted.
You cut yourself off, Dante.
I did. I was trying to give Steve all the space he needed.
I need a lot.
I'm just asking any other commissioners have any thoughts about either content, the way it's formatted, or anything that you see? Okay. Then is there anyone in opposition to or can't live with this document moving forward to council and the mayor for their review and acceptance as it's written? Okay, then I think we have our next set of recommendations that will go to council. And then that
Worthy of commendation to the subcommittee. I just want to.
No question. Thank you, subcommittee. Now, no pressure on policies, but good job for the school resource safety officer. Maybe if you can let us know when you'll be taking this at the next Tuesday work session or beyond, so that all the commissioners who would like to be there could also participate and just at least be in attendance and support that presentation.
Yeah, we'll have a discussion on email about when we want to do that, whether we want to meet as a subcommittee one more time before we bring it forward, or if we're ready to go on Tuesday. We'll have an email conversation and then let the full commission know what that date is so that they can plan to attend.
Very good. So again, congratulations on the first set of recommendations. The second set makes it harder. So now, good job and good work. So certainly we're past time. I just want to make one comment on the agenda item here under other scheduling. It just lists the HR police department discussion at council is March 23rd. And if I'm correct, I heard Rachel say that it will be happening on March 16th. So is that correct? I see Allison shaking her head.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you.
Okay, so March 16th is that opportunity to hear the HR and police discuss that process.
And the idea is to, excuse me, just to make it clear that the council is interested in hearing any reactions that commissioners may have on the following Tuesday, the 23rd, if that's if anyone is interested in taking them up on it. Thank you.
I see. Thank you. And the information and the material will be sent out to the commissioners sometime later this week.
We can make that happen. Good idea.
Excellent. Thank you.
Time, Allison?
It is roughly 3:10. There is often, just because there is often slight changes. I'm trying to say this in a reasonable way. The council doesn't always run on time like many elected bodies. So it will be as close to 3:10 as possible. And if we get any advanced information about something switching around on the agenda, I'll be sure to let you all know.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, I think we got a lot accomplished today. We will certainly expect to hear from Commissioner Prospero next time we meet on best practices around the country. That will be continuing on the agenda. And fear the beard, right? So
I'm sure policy will take 3 hours.
Okay, well,
I'll try to limit my comments, Josh, so we can get done on time. But we have good discussions.
Well, you'll just be making the recommendations, Steve, and presenting them. So we're good.
There's some crossover with the debate over the filibuster in Washington, I think, in this conversation.
Commissioners, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, so I appreciate all of your work, as I'm sure you do for each other, and we will see you next time. Have a great next subcommittee meeting, and we will see you again at the